How did the ancient daughter of a king change the course of history? Today, we're going to tell that story of a woman in the Old Testament and dive into how her decisions really did change not only her life, but the lives of thousands and thousands of others. So stay tuned.
Welcome to Bible Women in Bathrobes, the podcast where faith meets comfort. Join us Tuesday and Thursday mornings as the gals from Women Warriors of Light and their guests don bathrobes and dive into the inspiring stories of women in the Bible and the teachings of Jesus Christ. From Esther's bravery to the Sermon on the Mount, we explore it all with warmth, laughter, sisterhood, and maybe even a few sleepy-eyed moments. Tune in live or at your leisure as we learn lessons from Scripture which empower women today.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Bible Women in Bathrobes. I'm your host, Tamara K. Anderson, and joining me today is one of my amazing advisory board members from Women Warriors of Light, Amy Johnson. Amy, thank you for being here.
Thank you. I love being here. It's so great.
And today we are going to be in Exodus chapter 2. We are kind of continuing this story. 2 weeks ago, we talked about the Hebrew midwives. And then last week, we talked about Jochebed, who is Moses' mother. And today we get to talk about Pharaoh's daughter. And oh my goodness, talk about a woman who was courageous and brave and bucked prejudice and all that stuff. She was amazing. She really was. So we're going to talk about her. Setting the stage, this is a time when the Hebrews have been enslaved. They've been living in Egypt since Joseph in Egypt. That whole story of the Israelites moving there, it's been 400 years. And now we see Moses being born, should have been killed, because Pharaoh had commanded that the baby boys be killed or thrown into the river after the midwives wouldn't kill them. And so Pharaoh's mom, Jochebed, feels inspired to put her son, build him a little ark, she calls it, and insulate it. And Moses was a good baby, and she literally commended him to God and put him in the river and trusted that this was going to happen. That whatever happened was God's will, right? And so we picked this story up in Exodus chapter 2, verse 5, and we're going to cover 5 through 10, basically. So it says, and the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along the river. And her maidens walked, I got to go to the right line here, by the river's side. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. So she sees something. She's like, wonder what that is. I bet she had no idea she was about to change the course of history here. But, just a little curiosity there. God places this woman here. And then verse 6, and when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him and said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. So I'm just going to pause right there. She knew her father's feeling towards the Hebrews. There was this hatred, there was this fear of these people because they were just growing to be so big and so many of them because God had blessed them. And so she had a decision to make here. She knew that this baby was supposed to be thrown into the river to die, but God had sent her to the world at this time because he knew she would have compassion and change the course of history here. And so I'm just going to open that up and say, Amy, any thoughts on these verses here?
We sometimes will hear the phrase a mother's heart. And we'll sometimes talk about how even mothers who can't be mothers, aren't able to be mothers, still have a mother's heart. Mm-hmm. And I've experienced that. I've got some friends in other parts of the world that they were never able to have their own children, but they're older than me, and they treat me like I'm their daughter. They just have a mother's heart. And when I think of Pharaoh's daughter, I think of that, like that she opens this up and immediately the natural mother in her, knowing this child was supposed to be destroyed, still says, and has compassion on him. Says, my mama heart just can't do that. But my mama heart just, we're not going to go that route. And she has compassion. And I love that, because I think as women, if we really understand who we are, then we can be a mama heart to anybody that needs a mama's heart. And I love that she is that example of a mother's heart to us.
Yeah. Oh, I hadn't thought of that, but that is a beautiful thing to pull out of that. I was just thinking of how, well, first of all, tender, you talked about compassion, tender and compassionate she had to be, but she also had to have some courage in her heart, because she was going to have to take this baby to her dad and say, I'm keeping him, knowing exactly that her father has commanded that all these babies be thrown into the river. I just pulled him out of the river and I'm keeping him. He is my son. I'm going to raise him as mine. She must have had a good relationship with her dad. I don't know if she placed him in his arms and said, look at this sweet baby. You know, he was a good child. You know, we know that. But oh my goodness, that takes some guts, you know? So it wasn't just compassion that she had, but she had grit and courage to stand up to someone who could have said, nope, I'm throwing him out. You know what I mean?
Or maybe she convinced him, look, if we raise him in my household, he won't be raised like the Hebrews. He won't be one of them. He's fine. I want to have this baby. Let me have this baby. And maybe she turned on the waterworks. I don't know how we all have our different ways of working with our father, right? I don't know. But maybe she just looked at him and said, it'll be fine. He'll be raised an Egyptian. Doesn't matter what his bloodline is. Little did they know.
Yeah, I know.
Because truly he was a Hebrew. He was a child of the covenant. And I think that's an important thing, that when you are a child of the covenant, there is a bond with God. God doesn't forget his covenant keepers. And so as Egyptians, they probably didn't really fully understand that, even if they knew Joseph and that he was a covenant keeper and all of that. But maybe she went to him and said, it'll be fine. He'll be Egyptian.
But I think there's another thing to bring in here, is that you don't necessarily have to be a believer for God to have influence on you to bring about great things in the world. And I find it so interesting that in this case, he uses a woman with a tender heart, and her motherly instincts. He knew her heart. He knew she was good. He knew that she would look beyond this stigma of discrimination and just say, I love this baby.
Right.
Yeah. You know, that he knew she had a loving heart. He knew. And so I think we need to be careful also as believers to not be prejudiced against those who aren't, because God can influence them as well, you know?
So many times I think we're influenced and we don't even know it. I think there are so many times we have a thought to do something good and we don't recognize that that thought really didn't come from us. And of course, God will talk to anyone who will listen in any way, even if they don't realize they're listening.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think this is a beautiful, and she had such a key role. I mean, think of God trusting this woman to change history. I mean, literally her choice changed history for all of the Israelite nation and for Pharaoh and his house. I mean, this was a huge tipping point. And God trusted a woman to do this. It's so interesting to me. And I think it shows that God loves and values his daughters.
Yeah.
He really does. And he trusts us with important decisions like this that can change the world, you know?
Yeah, it's so good.
So good. Okay, well, let's continue on with cute Pharaoh's daughter here. Okay, so we're rewinding the story a little bit. One of the things that happened when Jochebed put Moses in the ark, she also sent her daughter Miriam to watch and see what happened. Because, yeah, as a mama, you can't just put your son in the water and trust that I got to know what happens. Do you know what I mean? So, Miriam was watching, it says, afar off. So Miriam approaches. God bless Miriam. This takes courage too. I mean, she is approaching the enemy here. She sees Pharaoh's daughter. I'm sure she's just like,
We do learn
oh,
later that Miriam's a bit of a firecracker, though.
yes, she is. Yes, she is. We have another firecracker in the scriptures. I'm telling you guys, women, you know, God he sends the right person at the right time at the right place. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And God uses us even if we're firecrackers.
And I have granddaughters like that would have no qualm about right. They would just walk right up to royalty and be like, hey, like, I do. I have granddaughters that are like that. I watch them. They're little and they're like in the 6-year-old range, and both of them, they just are firecrackers. They just would not even think twice.
Yeah, not intimidated at all. So it says here in verse 7, then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. And the maid went and called the child's mother. Oh, wow. It's
So good.
amazing. It is so amazing what happened here. And then I'll finish with this last verse and then we can discuss. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this child away and nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages. And the woman took the child and nursed it. Holy cannoli. I mean, this story just blows my mind over and over again. The good God can do with women who are willing to listen to their heart.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So let's start out here with Pharaoh's daughter and her heart turning and following, you know, what this cute little girl comes up to her and just says, hey, I know somebody who could nurse that baby for you, you know, because here she is with a crying baby. I know somebody that can stop that baby from crying. Oh, really?
Now I'm listening.
Now I'm totally into this, you know. Any thoughts on these verses here?
I really just can't even overstate the goodness of God in all of this. And for me to see this, you send your child away, you've loved on them, you've nurtured them, you've trusted the Lord, you've gone forward, and somehow the Lord still finds a way to bring them back to you. Where I've seen the opposite, where people are angry and they reject God and they're contentious in their families and they push their children away and they push. And then those children don't come back. It's too much. So I think the lesson for me when I look at this and I read this is send your children, give them to God, continue to follow the Lord, and somehow he will always bring them back to you sevenfold. Mm-hmm. That's really a beautiful, beautiful story that she gets to nurse that baby. And not only for the emotional aspect, but can we just talk about the physical aspect of needing to nurse a baby?
True. Yeah.
And I've had mastitis.
Oh, oof.
Where I was so sick that in a delirious fever state, it was by the grace of God that I came out of it. Like I've been that sick. So can we just talk about that for a minute? I mean, physically she needed to nurse that baby and then to have the opportunity to wean that baby properly instead of just give up that baby. So there's a lot going on here, but it's all about the goodness of God and how he really does take care of his people.
It really, really is true. And I'm so impressed with all the players in this story. You know, we have a little bit of Jochebed in this story, we have a little bit of Miriam in this story, and we have Pharaoh's daughter in this story, and they're all women that God is inspiring, and they are listening to him. They're saying the right things at the right time. They're being touched in their hearts to do the right thing at the right time. I guess my biggest thought here is just follow those thoughts that come to your mind and heart that are good thoughts, you know, because often that's God working through us.
Yeah.
And maybe sometimes those decisions won't impact as many as Pharaoh's daughter and Miriam and Jochebed, and that's okay. They can still impact maybe one person for good, or 10 people for good. The thing about this is you just never know the ripple effect of the choices that you make.
Yeah, because Moses' mother was very ordinary.
Mm-hmm.
And I think ordinary is good.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes we all want to be superstars, but ordinary is good. And the midwives, because we can't forget them,
Mm-hmm.
it was their choices that allowed the Pharaoh to change the law to cast him in the river, which allowed Moses' mother to cast him into the river in an ark, which allowed Pharaoh's. I mean, so, and the midwives were ordinary. They were ordinary people. And sometimes I think we don't realize the ripple effect, as you said, the good that can be done from being an ordinary, God-fearing, people-loving person in our own lives. We don't have to have a million followers and be a superstar to do good.
I love that, because I think all of us feel that, you know.
Yeah.
Most of us are quite ordinary.
I'm saying.
We feel like we're nobody in the story of the world. But the cool thing is we are not nobody to God. None of us are. You know, God knows each of us and our potential. He can see that end from the beginning. He knows that Moses's mom was the right woman to send him to. She was not the mother of a prophet when he was born, you know. He was born just like every other baby.
Yeah.
And then Pharaoh's daughter, he must have planted that seed of love and care in her heart, probably from the time she was very little, but also that grit to stand up to her dad and say, I'm raising this baby as my own, you know?
Just the grit to raise a baby.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And to go against that law. I'm standing up to you, Dad. Well, and I can honestly see, especially, we don't know how old she was. She could have been a teenager, she could have been older, but especially teenagers. Oh my goodness. Yeah, we kind of stand up to our parents sometimes, don't we? But you know, you know, so I can picture her with that, but these are amazing stories of ordinary people, except for Pharaoh's daughter. She was a little above ordinary in a lot of ways, but God put her in the right place at the right time. She was bathing in the river, and God helped her notice something. You know, so pay attention when God helps you notice something. Something could change for the good, right?
I love that.
Yeah. So it is beautiful. And I'd love to bring in a verse that is in the New Testament that kind of ties all this together. And this is found in Acts chapter 7. And it starts in verse 20. It says, we're kind of talking about different people throughout the history of time. They're recounting their stories here. The history of Israel and stuff like that. And it says, in which time Moses was born and was exceedingly fair and nourished up in his father's house 3 months. And when he was cast out, Pharaoh's daughter took him up and nourished him for her own son. And Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was mighty in words and deeds. And then, of course, we know what happened when he was old enough. He was cast out of Egypt, and so, but the learning he had in Egypt as the son of a ruler was to lead people and how to learn those skills, how to read, how to write. And these were all things that made him an instrument in God's hands to write those commandments, to lead the children of Israel out and to a promised land, or near to the promised land. They didn't quite make it there in his lifetime. But these things, it was like everything happened at the right time, at the right place. God knew that Moses, if he would have stayed with his family, A, could have been killed. B, wouldn't have had the skills he needed to lead the people. But he knew that taking him out from that situation, giving him to Pharaoh's daughter, that she would teach him what he needed to know. And then God would use those skills for good. I don't know. Any thoughts on these verses?
I think that's really important. And I find it interesting that Moses later talks about, being slow of speech, because he would have also been taught to command attention, I would think, in the house of Pharaoh, although maybe not so much as Pharaoh's own son would have been the next ruler. But I find it interesting. But I also find it interesting in Hebrews chapter 11, where it talks about faith. I
love this chapter.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Verse 23, it says, by faith, Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months of his parents because they saw he was a proper child. In the Greek, it actually means handsome, not proper. So they saw, oh, he's a pretty baby. Mm-hmm. The Egyptians will love this baby. He's a pretty baby, right? They saw that he was a proper child, and they were not afraid of the king's commandment. And I love that. I love that. But then by faith, Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. And my heart goes out to her. Mm-hmm. Because she did teach him. She did raise him. She did pull him out of that river. She did allow him to live. And then he chooses to run from Egypt.
Yeah.
And so her breaking heart a little bit on that. But I think it's really this vital part that we don't know what God has in store for us. We just have to walk the path that he gives us, and we don't know what that means for us, but we do know that he will always be by us and stand with us if we stand with him, as we stand with him.
Yeah. My heart can't help but go out to both Jochebed and Pharaoh's daughter. Yeah. As women who loved and gave their all and lost. Both of them had loss, with Moses. Both Jochebed, as she saw and had to give Moses to this Pharaoh's daughter when she was done nursing him. And then Pharaoh's daughter, like you said, when Moses left, or fled, he was afraid he was going to be killed because he had defended the Hebrews.
Right.
And you can't help but see a little bit of his mother in him there, of Pharaoh's daughter in him, because she protected him. So he had to have a bit of her tender heart. But also knowing these people are my people.
Yeah.
So there's part of me that wonders, did he tell her that story? Mom, I've got to leave because Pharaoh's men are going to come after me because I have killed to protect these people. How did she feel about that? Do you know what I mean?
I don't know. And did she have the opportunity to as it says in Hebrews, choose rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. Did she also have that choice that she could have made? I don't know, but I know this, that she raised a good person, and that doesn't happen by accident.
Yeah.
She raised a good person, and that's divine love and intervention by God, that Moses becomes a prophet and a good person.
Yeah.
And her pulling him out of the river was the catalyst for all of that.
I know. It's amazing how one decision can impact the rest of our lives, right?
Yeah.
It makes me kind of like, oh my gosh, I make decisions all the time. Am I making the right ones?
But I also love how we can see that God steps in and he moves things around, and he knows what we're going to do. And he makes it all beautiful if we will just keep turning to him.
Oh, that is a good reminder. That is a good reminder. He knows our strengths and our weaknesses, and he can make it all turn for our good in the end.
Yeah.
Whether we are Jochebed or Miriam or Pharaoh's daughter or Moses.
Or midwife.
Or midwives, like we've been talking about these last few weeks. My goodness, these are powerful stories. And I think my biggest takeaway is that God uses women to do his work as well as men. Sometimes I think we feel we're forgotten, especially in the world of the scriptures. But when we dive into the lives of these women, it is so clear to me that God loves his daughters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Any thoughts, final takeaways or thoughts from you?
I think my final takeaway is that as we act with compassion, which is a Christ-like characteristic, we can truly be led to change the world. But we must have compassion. We must have compassion.
That is a really, really good reminder. Oh my goodness, you guys. Well, thank you for joining us as we were able to dive in the story of Pharaoh's daughter. She is a great example of God using someone who perhaps was not a believer, but still God used them for good. So trust that God has a plan for you, that you are his, he knows you, and that he can help your life turn out for your good, even in the hard things, that good can come from it.
Thanks for tuning in to Bible, Women, and Bathrobes, hosted by Women Warriors of Light. We've loved exploring the stories of remarkable women or the teachings of the Savior today with you. If today's episode brought someone special to mind, be sure to spread the word. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a moment of inspiration and sisterhood. Just a friendly reminder, all opinions we share are entirely personal, as we are trying to decipher and apply Bible teachings just like you are. Until next time, stay faithful, and may your journey be blessed and illuminated by God's love.